So I was watching this popular TV show just a little bit ago, and this person on there was trying to sell a mechanical pocket watch that was over 100 years old. And it got me thinking about my watch and how my watch is a mechanical watch. And it got me thinking about, what would happen if the whole power grid fails and we no longer have electricity, and probably 49 out of 50 people who, rely on digital clocks or battery power clocks to tell time would suddenly have no way to tell time anymore. The number's probably higher than 1 in 50, but I would probably take an educated guess and say that 1 out of 50 people have a mechanical watch somewhere within their reach without having to go out and buy one, because if the power grid fails, then you're not going to find a mechanical watch anywhere. Those things are going to go up right away. And second of all, you're not even going to be able to find one because nobody really carries those things. The only way you can buy one is online. And fortunately, I have one. It's a wristwatch, and a very cool looking one, I might add. I only paid $15 for it, including shipping, and it works like a charm. These things aren't as accurate, and every week that goes by, I have to set the minute hand back about 6 minutes. So, give or take about a minute a day, the watch, is a bit fast. So, you would have that problem to worry about. They wouldn't be as accurate, but that's how people used to tell time. And it just got me thinking that most people wouldn't be able to tell time if our power grid fails, if a solar flare, hit the Earth, X-class flare, and suddenly this watch that's worth practically nothing, it's not even worth the $15 I paid for it, would suddenly be worth its weight in gold, if not even more than that, because you would think that in a situation where there's no electricity, that people, that telling time would be the least of people's worries, which initially it would be. People would have some serious issues to deal with, obviously, especially with our population the way it is today. That would probably wipe out 90% of the world's population if the entire world lost its power. And a solar flare wouldn't really do that. A solar flare would only knock out half the world's power. The side that's facing the sun at that time would lose their power. So it wouldn't be everybody, it'd be about half of everybody. In the worst possible scenario, which has probably never happened before, probably never will happen, because, we're talking once every few hundred years that we estimate the Earth gets hit by one of these X-class flares. Give the situation that the Earth is hit by one of them, and then say 2-3 days, maybe even a week later, the other side of the Earth is hit by a flare of the same magnitude, therefore wiping out the other side of the Earth's power as well. Worst possible case scenario. Will it happen? Highly doubtful. I mean, we're at very favorable odds that we don't even get hit by a flare at all, which we will. It is a matter of time, but the amount of time that they estimate is few and far between, fortunately. It has been, 160 some odd years, 165-ish years since we've been hit by one of those, something like that. Or no, it was more like 150 years, because the Carrington event happened, I believe, in the 1860s, around when the Civil War was happening. And they knew about this because of not only the Northern Lights. They said that the Northern Lights was able to be seen as far south as Cuba, which is astonishing. I live in Florida, and I couldn't imagine seeing the Northern Lights. I've actually never seen them. It's on my bucket list. Me being an avid person who follows astronomy and all of that, that'd be amazing to see the Northern Lights. So, if all that happened and we're knocked back to the Stone Age, so to speak, or maybe knocked back to, the early 1800s, I say that because we do have a lot of material today that we didn't have back then. practically everything that you see around you is made by electricity in one way or another. And we have a lot of items. We've got matchbooks. We have plastic containers. We've got, little things like sunglasses, shoes that we have today. There's a lot of things that we have that doesn't require electricity that would be great to have, or would have been great to have, 150, 200 years ago. But these people didn't have anything really what we have today. So, if you look around you, there's a lot of things that we could benefit from that doesn't require electricity. So it would be great, a lot of tools and things like that. So, but on the other hand, transportation would be over pretty much. The way that we get around today would not exist anymore. Mass transportation would not exist, which would therefore, take out grocery stores, anywhere that you can do any shopping, because all of a sudden there's no way to get the goods to the stores. And there would be mass panic and everybody would loot the stores and all this and that. And, most people know this. Most people know that if the world ran out of electricity, bad things will happen and most people will die. People will starve to death. People will kill each other. It would just be a horrible nightmarish situation. If you can hunker down, hell, even hunker down for even 6 months, you would stand a pretty good chance of coming out alive. Ideally, I would want to have the ability to survive a year. They say a 100-pound bag of rice will feed a family of 4 for a year, and you won't starve to death, and you'll be malnourished, but it has just the right stuff in rice for you to survive on. But I hate rice. It would be a very hellish existence for me for a year if I had to eat rice 3 times a day. Oh my God. I would probably be contemplating suicide by the end of that year. But, unfortunately, I live in a place where basements cannot exist. So it makes it very difficult, given the place that I live, for me to survive that amount of time without you just plain being lucky, dog eat dog world, you come out on top. It would be difficult to hide in your house for that long and not get discovered, especially with the looting and everything. People are going to be starving. They're going to go house to house, break into houses for food. So it's only a matter of time before you get hit. So, it would be very difficult. We live in a great place. We're not affected dramatically by the winter, which is great. The summer times here are awful. We get the thunderstorms and stuff. I'm veering off topic as far as that goes, but the weather's great to survive here, but the inability to go underground, the not being able to do so, puts our entire population where I live at a very big disadvantage, because you're out in the open. If your house is above ground, or if all of your house is above ground, you're at a significant disadvantage if the world loses power. So, that's not a good thing. But anyway, I was just watching the show and just thought about this watch that I have, and that would be a good thing to have if you lose power, or if the world loses power. If you lose power, all you gotta do is just pay your bill and they'll turn it back on, that kind of thing. But if the world loses power, that would be a nice tool to have. It would be worth a lot. I'm sure you could trade probably a significant amount of goods for a mechanical watch. That would be pretty awesome to have as far as something like that goes. I think that's pretty much it. I was going to talk about something else, but I stayed on that topic for so long. But there's all kinds of things around the house that you could use in a situation like that, and there's entire shows that are dedicated to covering these types of items that you could have that will work to your advantage. So I'm not even going to get into that. But yeah, I think the moral of this story is buy a mechanical watch, whether it's a pocket watch or a wristwatch, because you never know. It might be worth its weight in gold one day, even if you buy it from China, like where I bought it from. Yeah, and actually that's where I was going to veer into, the fact that China makes a lot of our stuff, which is more or less worthless. The only thing that comes out of China that I would say would be very valuable would be something that has a few or several hundred years attached to it. Like they build electronics, they build stuff like that, but they can't stand the test of time for decades and still be worth a lot of money unless it has some significant historical value attached to it. Which is really sad because, because that China and the manufacturing and our politics here in the U.S. has turned us into a service country. I would say 80% of all jobs in the United States are computer-based, that these people rely on a computer and the internet and electronics to do their job. And obviously it didn't always used to be like that. It used to be the opposite. We used to be a very heavily, we used to be a manufacturing giant, the biggest in the world, in fact, which is not even near the case anymore. And politics play into it because businesses, they outsource. They just go outside the country because, frankly, they save money and they don't have to pay their employees as much. Which is honestly, it's a company with very bad morals. You're born in this country. This country allowed your business to start and to flourish. And, for you to save a buck or two, you're going to take this company out of the country in which it was born. You're putting your fellow citizens out of work, making this country a little worse off than it was before. And, granted, you are going to help out people in other countries, which is a good thing, but you're taking advantage of them. You're not a moral person at all. You've got poor ethics if you outsource your business to Mexico or India or somewhere so that you could pay your employees half what you pay them now. You do save a lot of money, you make a lot of money, but it's just an awful ethical thing to do, and you're hurting your country. And a lot of that has to do with the government, with them being at fault because they don't punish businesses for doing so financially. If a company that's born in America, and if the owners of this company choose to remain living in America, whether if it's shareholders or board members or private owners, if they live in the United States, but they move their business offshore, they should be heavily taxed for it. And this is not something that I'm just coming up with. This has been in debate for a long time. And it just blows my mind that Congress still has not passed this. They talk about taxes constantly. Taxes, taxes, taxes. And we need more of them because more people are out of work, because more companies are either closing their doors or they're going offshore. People are just moving their businesses out of this country because they make more money. And they're only reaping more benefits for it. The way that you can get these businesses to come back to our soil is to tax them heavily, to the point where they're not saving any money by hiring cheaper employees. For them to operate offshore and still headquarter in the U.S. or owners living in the U.S., they should be taxed. Their company should be taxed ridiculously. I'm talking like, their GDP, call it 35% of that would go straight to taxes, additional to the taxes they're paying now. Because another reason they move offshore is so they don't have to pay the taxes that they would pay here, their business taxes and everything else that comes with it. In some countries, when you go out there, you don't have to pay any taxes at all. So they should be taxed like crazy, for one thing. That would cause a major boost to our economy in more ways than one. I mean, this is a no-brainer, people. You've got these companies that would suddenly be paying 20, 30, 40% of their revenue to the government. And that's penalty for them operating offshore. And make them pay it per month or even per year. Come around tax time. 40% of what that company profited from goes to the government. No questions asked. And if they want to not pay that kind of money, then they need to bring their businesses back to the U.S. And that is the one way that we're going to get 100% of these people who are out of work to start working again. And not only would it put everybody to work, there would be such a high demand for employment if all these companies return to the US. There would be more need for jobs than there would be people 18 and over. So therefore, we would be welcoming immigrants to this country with open arms because there are so many jobs here. We can't fill them. We need more people in this country. I mean, how great would that be? How amazing would that be? You know, immigration is a very important thing. You know, that's the backbone of this country. That's how this country started, was through immigration, people coming here and starting a life. And how awesome would that be for that to occur a second time, for that to come back around again? That would give people more reason to come here. I mean, people all over the world, they really want to come here for the opportunities. And how great would it be to have all these companies that are offshore return to the US and need to fill jobs? And, you know, what better way to fill that than with more immigration? That would be amazing. Practically guaranteeing work when you get here. Whereas, you know, a lot of people who come here, they're not guaranteed shit. You know, the only thing that they're guaranteed is a trip back to their country if they get caught crossing over into our country. So, I mean, it would just be an amazing thing. And economically, it would be phenomenal for all these companies to come back because suddenly the U.S. would be a manufacturing giant again. Because all these manufacturing companies, they're not here anymore. They're everywhere else but here. And, you know, I think the bottom line is that American workers, you know, they require more money per hour. I mean, we're spoiled in this country. I mean, let's face it. We've got everything we want. Even people who are middle class, you've got everything you want. You know, you've got your computer, you've got your smartphone, you've got a decent job. Might not be a job you like, but it's a place where you can work and make money, right? You've got a roof over your head. You've got, you know, think about your utilities. You know, not only are these utilities available to you, but you're required by law to have these things handed to you, public service. You know, our country requires a fire department to be in your area. It requires a police department. It requires that you have your trash picked up on a weekly basis, sometimes more than once a week. I mean, these kind of basic necessities. I mean, it's our basic rights as Americans to have these things for us. Education, you know, on and on. And, you know, we've got a lot more than what most of the world has. And you don't have to make a whole lot of money to live like a king in this country. So, you know, we've got it good as it is. And I can understand why companies would want to move offshore to save money because, you know, year after year, our inflation rises. Therefore, our minimum wage has to keep catching up to our inflation. And therefore, our employees, you know, we have to pay more money. But that's the way, you know, that's just the way it is. Companies are getting way too greedy. Millionaires are getting more numerous. The rich keep getting richer and richer and richer. And one way I could see to slow down that growth, I mean, when you're a billionaire, you're a billionaire, you know? I mean, at that point, you know, to make another $1 billion to be worth $2 billion, I mean, when 99% of the world looks at you who's worth $1 billion, and then you're suddenly worth $2 billion, you know, another $1 billion, it's not much of a difference. You're a fucking billionaire. You know, it really doesn't matter at that point. You can have anything you want if you're worth $1 billion. You know, you're set. You're done. I mean, you're pretty much guaranteed wealthy for the rest of your life. Doesn't matter how old you are. So it's really sad to see the greed that happens in this country on how people they crave more and more and more. And for them to help achieve these endless goals that they have set for themselves, they move their companies offshore so they can get to their goals quicker, which their goals are unrealistic. You know, if their goal is $50 billion and they hit $50 billion, they're not just going to call it quits. They want more and they want more and more and more. Greed to the extreme, really. But it would just be nice for our government to help put a stop to that, to at least get these companies back here so we can have more of us working. And the businesses, they're going to bitch, they're going to complain, and they're going to fight kicking and screaming to keep their companies offshore so they can make a higher profit. But even if they come back to the US, they're still going to make a profit. They are still not going to be hurting. The only thing that's going to happen would be the opposite. They're going to be helping this country as a whole. It would help tremendously. I mean, there is no way we could possibly lose. As a country, as a population, yes, the owners, they're going to lose, oh my God, I'm going to lose $1.2 billion a year because now I have to pay these extra taxes, or I have to pay my employees more, or I have to move my company back to US soil, and that's going to cost billions of dollars. Well, you know what? If it costs them that much to do that, they can afford it. They'll be fine. And if they don't want to do it, then just pay the 30-40% taxes annually. That would be required for them to pay. I mean, yes, that is a pretty unfairly high amount. But frankly, if you don't want to pay that amount of tax for having an offshore company, then disown the US. Then don't attach your name to this country anymore. Switch up your citizenship, become a Mexican or become an Indian or whatever. Otherwise, it's unfair to the rest of us, to all the other business owners that are out there. It's not really fair to see this thriving company suddenly move offshore so they can double their profit. It makes it look really easy, and other companies are going to want to follow suit, because everybody's got a certain level of greed to them, and, say that Ford decides to fully move offshore, and, Buick is looking at them. I'm just using Buick as an example. GM, we can call it GM or whatever. Say that Ford moves everything offshore. They're not in the US anymore. And GM sees this happening. And then a year after Ford leaves, all of a sudden their profit margins have increased 30% because suddenly they don't have to pay the taxes that they used to have to pay. They don't have to pay the employees that they used to have to pay. The same amount, that is. And GM sees that and they're thinking, wow, why don't we do that? We're going to make a whole hell of a lot of money if we do that. Why stick around? Why stick around here and earn 30% less when we can move offshore and make 30% more? And that's why so many companies are moving offshore. It's a lot of it is following suit. Just seeing what's happening out there, and they make it look not really easy, but they make it look very profitable. That's how these companies are making it look. And it is ridiculous. So if anybody's listening to this, you need to write to your congressman, to your senator, to your governor, to the president, write to everybody. Vice president, minority whip, majority whip, everybody. It doesn't matter who. Everybody. Anybody you can think of that might in one way or another be able to tax these companies that are offshore ridiculously. I don't thoroughly have knowledge on this subject, so they might even be paying taxes for being offshore now. Last I heard they weren't, but I don't specialize in this subject, so I only know so much. And everything that I do know about that subject, I wouldn't really take 100% seriously. I'm pretty confident of what I'm talking about, but what I'm trying to say is that these companies might already be paying taxes. This might actually already be occurring, but the bottom line is that they're not paying enough. They need to be paying a lot more. They need to make up for the fact that they put so many people out of work, and our country is losing so much money by this American company not being in America anymore. It's an oxymoron. It's ridiculous. So that's what I think that you all need to do. You got to write to any politician you can, and don't do it just once. Write to them over and over again. Really make sure they get the message. Just write to them until they write you back. Because, the first few times you write to politicians, and I've done this before, they don't respond. And actually, some of them, you really gotta be very adamant. It does take a lot of time to do, but if outsourcing has affected you directly, personally, I'm in school for the IT industry, IT management, and or programming also, computer and web programming, that particularly has affected that industry pretty heavily, because those types of fields, especially in the field of programming, it's all going offshore to India and not China, but countries where English is spoken and understood better than others. India, I know, is the big one. That's the one where the majority of the programming jobs are going to. In the US, a programmer makes very good money. Starting out, you make about 50, 60 a year. You can make, the sky's the limit, You could develop, a huge website like YouTube or Facebook and become a billionaire. So there is no limit to the amount you can make as a programmer. But when you're an average Joe Schmo software developer, you work for whatever company, they will, they'll benefit better if they have an Indian programmer working for $25,000 a year versus an American programmer working for $80,000 a year. And since that industry is entirely computer based, it is not difficult at all to move a company from the US to India that is software based. So it's very unfortunate, and it's happening more and more. It's happening to the point where it scares me it makes me wonder if that's even the right industry to get into, because possibly by the time I get in the door, there might not be anything to get into. And I'm only going for an associate's degree. So, bachelor's degrees are going to be higher in demand, obviously, because you get more education. So it just worries me that in the programming field, that all there is going to be out there in the US for software developing would be for people with bachelor's degrees. So I don't know. There's a lot to consider there, a lot to think about. But anyway, I believe that is my 2 cents worth. So contact your politician, local, federal, doesn't matter who, anybody you can think of, write to them. Tell them about how you feel about outsourcing. Tell them that they need to tax these companies heavier. And hell, even throw in some tax breaks or something. If your company decides to move back to the US fully, 100%, not just 3 departments worth, the entire company, if it moves back to US soil, then, give them a tax break for 5 years or whatever, just for the sake of moving back. But just tell them how you feel and tell them what you believe needs to be done. And in my opinion, that is exactly what we need to do. We need to move them back here, put more Americans to work, get everybody back to work, because honestly, that is the best solution. Tax breaks isn't going to really help for the public, giving startup businesses more leeway to start up, giving them interest-free loans and all this and that and all that bullshit. It's nice, but that's not going to put everybody to work. The only way that's really going to help a short-term, or a good long-term solution, that is, a good long-term solution that could really be here in 5 years. I mean, that's really it. That's all I can think of. And what a move it would do for this country. I mean, we are already the most powerful country, the most influential country in the entire world by far. We're a technological giant. Nobody comes close to the things that the U.S. does, whether if it's, innovation, entertainment, whatever. So how great it would be for all of these companies that started in the U.S. that have since left to return to the U.S., return to its home, and have American employees working for that company again. Basically turn the U.S. back into where it was in the 1950s, 1940s, and add the service industry on top of that. So we would be a manufacturing giant and a service giant at the same time. because it really worries me that if the power grid does fail from something like a solar flare, it's kind of tying all this in, the U.S. would be in some serious fucking trouble, because we produce things, especially for the government contracts and stuff. Manufacturing is very important in that aspect. We still build, airplanes and things like that, but the majority of the stuff that we used to build isn't here anymore. Other countries have it. So if our power grid completely fails and all of our computers shut down and we can't get those back again, then this country is gonna find itself in a third world status, because there's not going to be anything here to build. Everybody else is building it except for us. So it's just scary how fragile that our country has become in that aspect, that all it takes is just for our electricity to be taken away, and this country is over. It is done. It is done. And it's a very frightening thought to think of that. And, kind of adding some extra insurance to that policy would be to bring the offshore companies back, the manufacturing businesses that have since left in decades past, to bring them back. That would be helpful in many more ways than one. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Have a good day.